Producing one of the world's longest-running distilleries, Belvedere Vodka is the world's finest all-natural vodka. Part of a 600-year Polish vodka-making tradition, Belvedere is made with non-GMO Polish rye, pure water, and no additives. Recognized for quality, Belvedere was named the ISC World Vodka Producer of the Year in 2015, 2016, and 2017. Enjoy a delicious cocktail with Belvedere Vodka today, and remember to always drink responsibly. All right, welcome to this week's episode of the JJ Redick podcast. It's been a few weeks since I've had a podcast episode come out. I'm out here in LA on a West Coast trip, and I thought it would be great to have my good friend Ben Winston on the podcast. Ben and I met 4 years ago while we were both living in LA. We have maintained an unbelievable friendship, and he's a really good guy. Ben came over to the States to be the showrunner for the Late Late Show with James Corden. It's been a wildly successful show. Ben has, I'm looking at 6 Emmy trophies in his office right now. He's been nominated for 14 Emmys. He has produced the Grammys, I believe, twice, and the Tony Awards. In addition, Ben's hit show, Drop the Mic, has moved from TBS to TNT, and his new show will debut after the Super Bowl. It's called World's Best. Please give it a watch next Sunday. So Ben and I had dinner last night, and we talked. We actually did like a pre-podcast at dinner, and we're gonna chat about a few topics right now. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Ben Winston. Joined by my dear friend, Ben Winston. Ben, for anyone who hasn't heard your previous 2 appearances on the JJ Redick podcast on the Vertical Network, back in the Yahoo days of this podcast, for background, you and I met basically 4 years ago while on vacation in Cabo. We decided to reluctantly share a cab together to dinner with our wives and figured out that we both lived in LA, and we became friends while I was a Clippers player, and have obviously remained friends since I left the West Coast. And this is, other than Tommy, who's actually 5 feet to my left right now, you are the only 3-time guest on my podcast. Yeah.
3-time guest. So Tommy got there first.
Tommy got there first only because he was hosting Mailbag Editions with me, co-hosting. Yeah.
I'm very honored to have been here 3 times. Delighted to be back.
For the OG listeners, dating back to 2016, I think that I frequently get that the Ben Winston episodes were the best ones I did on the Yahoo podcast.
That's just my wife, I think, tweeting about it. I don't think it's any. I just think it's my wife. But it's very kind. I listen. I love your podcast. I think it's brilliant. I'm delighted to be back on it. Do you feel a little bit upset that you used to really like the fact that you were the only basketball player who had a podcast? And now there's like Vince Carter and CJ McCollum, and they've got podcasts now. Do you feel like they're coming for you? Do you listen to their podcast? Do you like them? Do you like text them and go, "Hey man, I'm supposed to be the intelligent athlete here. Why are you trying to get in on my game?"
I have a little bit of beef with the Ringer. They went and hired 2 NBA players.
Yeah, well, they're hedging their bets.
Yeah.
Because you just basically, it's only when you can be, when you can be bothered to do this, you actually bother doing it. It's like I think podcast listeners need commitment, JJ. I think that
you've told me this before.
I feel like you're just a tease. You're like, yeah, I'm going to do it in the Ringer, and then you turn up once a blue moon and start talking to the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and then you leave everybody for 2 weeks, and then you come. I think people need consistency. People need to know Tuesday morning, I'm going to listen to JJ Redick's podcast. I'm not convinced about this once in a blue moon thing. I think we're going to have to work on it.
I did 24 episodes last year. That's like 2 a month.
That's a lot. Okay.
2 a month.
Well, how often do these other guys do them? Have you been listening to them?
So hold on a second. Here's the one thing. First of all, I'm hedging my bets as well with the Ringer because I'm only signing 1-year contracts with them.
That's all you do all the time.
I just
sign 1-year contracts now. That's all you do. You only sign 1-year deals with whoever it is. It's just 1-year deals.
It's all about fit, man.
I love it.
It's all about being in the right spot in a great fit.
Keep them guessing. I love it every year.
But secondly, everybody else has a co-host. Like CJ McCollum has a co-host, and I'm pretty sure the co-host is in the media, right? He's a media personality,
right?
And Kent and Vince have each other, and I believe they also have someone from the media. So I feel like a little bit like I'm on a different path.
Yeah, you're
than everyone else.
No, you don't need anyone holding your hand.
I mean, if you go down the list of athletes, current athletes that have podcasts,
you're the only one without a co-host.
Yeah.
Well, good on you. There you go.
So,
I love that.
A little positivity.
So I take it back. Right. I take it back. Well, I'm very excited to be here, and I put something to you about this podcast. I said, how about, because we can meander and talk about various different subjects, as we often do. But I was thinking I wanted to ask you 3 questions, and I wanted you to ask me 3 questions.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought. That was my attempt to sort of say, well, let's do something a little bit different this time.
Yeah, it's the neurotic producer in you.
Yeah, I couldn't
just a free-flowing conversation goes against everything you stand for.
Well, it's not a free-flowing conversation that bothers me. I just think people need to have structure. Like they need to know that your podcast's coming out every week. They also need to know what's coming up on this episode. So I have 3 questions for you, and
we're going to alternate questions.
I think so. I think
might be questions within a question, but what are your 3 questions to me? Just so
okay, I'm going to tell you what my 3 questions are, but I don't want you to answer them yet.
Okay.
My first question to you is, when you signed a new deal in the summer and we were together, we were on vacation together, and you were getting offers from a variety of teams, and your heart was in Sixers, your heart was in Philly, and when they came with an offer, which was a good offer, you signed and you were excited to go back. How annoyed are you when you then realize for the first time in your career, you're not a starter? And would you have still signed with them had you known you weren't going to be a starter? Or did you feel like they sold you a bill of goods and then went, oh, he signed, terrific. Okay, well, there's your bench over there, and enjoy watching Markelle Fultz. So that's my first question. My second question to you is, you do a podcast, you're out there, you're chatting away, you're opening yourself up. We all hear about what wines you like and that you bank with Goldman Sachs. We hear it all. But
Goldman Sachs.
Well, that's what you do. That's last week's podcast. But you're not on social media at all. You're not on Twitter anymore. You're not on Instagram anymore. I'm interested by that you'll be out there, but you won't be out there in a social media platform. I'm interested in that. And my third and final question when I get to it will be, how crucial is the mood in a locker room for success of a team? And I'm always very interested about this. And when we ever get together socially, I always ask you about that because it's just something I'm interested in. And I'm also interested with Jimmy Butler and Brett Brown and what happened there with that thing that occurred in the locker room that maybe did happen, that maybe didn't happen. How does somebody like Jimmy Butler affect the locker room? I've gone at it. Those are my 3. I think they're a decent 3. That's what your listeners are going to hear from me today. They don't want to hear about carpool karaoke or late shows or TV shows that they're never going to watch. They want to know about Brian Caiangelo's burner accounts. And those are the things that we're going to be talking about today. So if you ask me on your podcast, I'm going to be let loose, and I'm very excited about it.
If you didn't have 9 television shows to run, you could be my co-host.
Thank you.
This would be...
It would be problematic for you because I don't know if I'd let you get a word in. That's the problem.
You would dominate the conversation.
I'd also be like, I just think I'd be a pain in your ass. I'd be like, come on, how much are Duke playing Zion? I'd be sort of just throwing things to things that you wouldn't want to talk about. So that's I don't think that'd be a good idea. What are your 3?
My 3 questions deal with imposter syndrome, which you suffer from significantly. I want to ask you about successes and failures you've had here in your 4 years in Hollywood. And then just a kind of a general question of whether you and I are on this sort of the same level in our respective careers. If Ben Winston is sort of the me of the television industry. It's an interesting thought. We could start there.
Well, relatively, I'm much younger. So although I'm serious. Although I'm 2 years older than you, I would say that I am. I guess. Look, I work in TV. I said this to you. We've had this discussion a little bit before. In that I'm not a Mark Burnett. I'm not a Tom Werner. I'm not one of the great producers. I'm not there yet. So I'm not Steph Curry or LeBron James. But hey, I can do a bit. and I'm useful. And so I said, yeah. So I think that there is similarities in there. Why? What would you say? Was that what you would?
I think in some ways, it's a huge knock on my ability as a basketball player to compare yourself to me. But in other ways, I think it's a compliment. So if sort of NBA players are judged individually on all NBA appearances or all-star games or awards, then, I don't really have any of those. And I'm literally staring across your office at 6 Emmy Awards that you won. So there's a bit of a difference. I think too, it's like, I always think about this, like I consider myself to be sort of the I don't want to use the word famous, but I'll use it. Like the perfect amount of famous. You know what I mean by that?
No, go on. Explain what that.
Like I can go walk down the street. Yeah. And like, I'm not saying I never get noticed or people don't bother me, but it's like, I don't have to go places with a security guard. Yeah. I can kind of just go about and live my life. Yeah. I don't really have to sort of worry about stuff, and but I also get some of the perks, right? You get some of the access you want.
Yeah, you
whether
get
that's
a reservation
or restaurants. Place. Yeah. Like, Major Domo tonight, David Chang's restaurant. We're going.
Was that a plug? Or did you just plug it on the
David Chang has a podcast on the Ringer too.
Oh, so I see. So yeah. I just thought you were plugging to try and get a free meal or something. You just, because you were like talking about it very seriously, and then you just slowly dropped in a restaurant reservation that you'd made later. No, I think that you're the. I don't quite know how to answer that question. It's a difficult one. I don't really know. I think that we're both. What I'd say about the two of us is we're both hugely ambitious and driven in what we want to do, and I think that's why we get along so well. I think that we're both quite serious about it. You are as serious a person could be when it comes to basketball, which is why I have to take the mickey out of you sometimes. And I think I'm very serious about the job I'm doing and the work I'm doing. And I don't know how we would compare, but I think where we relate is in our ambition and in our drive, and we're both incredibly determined. And I think we were probably growing up, we were both more determined than any of our friends were who we hung out with, in that they maybe didn't know what they wanted to do. You've probably wanted to be a basketball player since you were 7 years old. I've always wanted to make TV shows since I was 7-year-old. And you would spend your summers and your afternoons in the gym or at practice. I would spend my summers, afternoons, weekdays, after schools at TV shows, on sets, learning from directors, learning from producers. So I think that that's probably the most similarity, in that we just have a real drive for it.
It's interesting because I think a lot of ambitious, successful people, I think they sort of, attract other ambitious, successful people, and you end up being friends with people that have a lot of the same values as you. But it's interesting because I was actually, we talked a little bit about this at dinner last night, but I was thinking about it earlier today, and it's like, one of the reasons I think it's easy for me to root for, let's say, your success in your field is because you do something that's totally different, right?
It's really interesting. I had that feeling before I moved to America. So when I lived in the UK, I would spend time with UK producers who were my friends, and I'd always wish them success, but with a limit. And when they had success, there was part of me that was like, that's a little bit annoying. And interestingly, when I moved out here, and we moved out here to start the Late Late Show with James Corden on CBS, and that was our first show when we came here, and that was the reason I moved here. And everybody would come up to me, other producers and agents and people in the industry, and they'd be like, this is, we really wish you luck. This is going to be great. It's going to be amazing. And I was like, it's not. How you have no idea if it's going to be amazing. But it was such kindness that we were confronted with that it made me feel bad, because I've felt like I saw a lot of kindness from Americans and fellow professionals. And I've changed in my being now. I try as best as I can just to wish people success rather than worry about. I've just got to worry about my own success rather than being upset about others. The difference is you're competing against those specific people. I'm not. So when I see another producer, yeah, you could argue I'm competing for a slot, or I'm competing at a pitch or a commission or whatever you call it. But ultimately, you're literally competing for success because only one team can win, I guess. So that's where I think
it's part of the reason, though, that the NBA is it's kind of set up for drama.
Yeah,
within a team and within sort of the league, there's really a finite amount of resources that each player can go after. I.e., money, endorsements, promotions.
I think you have a real shot in getting the All-Star team this year. I think that I do. Listen, I don't know as much as your listeners would do. I've only got into this sport since the two of us became friends. So I've only been following basketball for 4 years. My sport is football, not soccer. I refuse to call it that. It's football. I'm an Arsenal man. But the point is, from what I can see, and maybe it's lack of other guards, or maybe it's your percentages this year, or how well you're playing, you must be looking at that All-Star and going, hold on, no, I do have a shot with it. Does that not cross your mind?
No, it doesn't.
Why? Because you're trying to protect yourself and your emotion from like thinking maybe I could have a shot at it? Or just because
I really don't.
Really don't think?
No, I'll tell you why. Because like earlier in my career, and like maybe like when I first got to LA, like there were a couple seasons where I was like, oh, if we win a lot of games, maybe I could have a chance. And maybe like guys would get injured, and then you're like, oh, they're going to name a replacement. Maybe it's just like that part of my career. I think is like it's sailed. It's gone.
Well, who are the guards in the East that are going to get in?
I have no idea. That's an entirely different podcast. Go to the NBA Ringer show.
But it's interesting, right? He's got a shot, wouldn't he?
No, but my point to you is like in the NBA, right? So like if I gave a fuck, which I don't.
Yeah.
I think that, and I'm saying there's maybe other guys in the league that would, in that situation, it could cause some internal strife.
Yeah.
And that's one example, right? Guys are always in sort of contract years, and it just seems like the NBA is sort of set up for drama. And so it actually is weird. Like I've noticed this more and more as my career has gone on. And I don't know if it's generational or if it's social media, but I find that like even within a team, like there's not the same rooting for each other that there used to be.
See, I think of the NBA as a really funny thing. And as like I say, as coming as an outsider who knew nothing about it 4 years ago, I find it incredibly undramatic in a way that no. I think that the gossip and the trading and the stuff that happens on the court and the social media interest in it and the hip hop culture of it, and I love it. I'm swept away in it. But I also believe that it doesn't matter if you lose a game. It doesn't matter if you lose a game in the lead off to playoffs. It's bonkers to me. As someone who is a diehard football fan, every single game that Arsenal play matters. If we lose a game this weekend, then we drop 3 points. If we tie a game, we only get 1 point. Every single game matters to us winning something. Whereas, let's be honest, all you are playing for how many months of the season is where you are in the final 8 in your standings of who you play for. Your entire thing is qualifying for the playoffs. And it's really fascinating to me that people get so swept up in a game, they can travel to a game, they'll buy a ticket for a game, they'll get so excited by a game that actually literally means nothing. And I just you plugged a restaurant, I'm going to plug something now. We've just created a show that I'd love your listeners to watch because it's one of the best shows we've ever made. And I think it would be something that people who are listening to your podcast would love. It's a show on Netflix. And it's called Sunderland Till I Die. And it's a documentary about a football club in a town called Sunderland. It's an 8-part series that follows behind the scenes of their year. We're in the locker room, we're with the coaches, we're with the teams. And that is a town that relies on football. And every single game is life or death. And that is a dramatic sport. So I love basketball, I genuinely do. But when you watch Sunderland Till I Die, and I'd love you to watch it, Jay, it's like you'll see what I mean about how like literally the first game of the season matters a huge amount.
A couple questions. Okay. Follow up on that.
I need to get to my first question to you, otherwise we're going to run out of time. But okay.
How many games per week are in the English Premier League? 2?
Well, we play 2. We play 4 different trophies.
I know all that.
Okay, so on average you'll play 2 games a week.
Okay, 2 games a week.
Yeah. Okay. On average.
So, of course, every game matters. We play for like 4 games a week. Sometimes we have 5 games and 7 nights. Sometimes we have 5 and 8. Like,
okay, what are you doing? Is this showing off? I mean, what are you? Okay, I'm not saying you're not.
We're trying to win, no doubt.
Yeah, but
it's just like it is.
It's a mass. It's a business.
It's part of the culture. Is just sort of like taking a long term.
No, I get it. In baseball, it's even more, isn't it?
How many teams are in the English Premier League? I know there's relegation. There's 20 every year.
There's 20 teams, and what's exciting?
And they're all in England.
They're all in England.
The size of New Jersey.
Yes.
Okay. So for a place like Sunderland,
yeah, I mean it's like 4 hours outside of London.
If Trenton had a professional team,
but there's 4
Of course, it's going to matter.
Yeah, I don't know if you can compare that. I don't think it's right for you to say that just because England's small, I think Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham,
they're huge
Chelsea,
global brands.
they're global brands.
No
that if that many global brands came out of the country of New Jersey, you'd pay a lot more respect to New Jersey. If I said to you that literally all of those sports teams and those athletes and now if we're getting onto England, how much they've produced for such a small country is phenomenal. But all I mean is that it's just a very different way of looking at it. You also, guys, you don't have relegation, which is one of the most exciting things, which I don't think Americans even almost know about, in that the bottom two clubs in the Premier League or in the first division or in the second division, the bottom three teams, sorry, I beg your pardon, they go down to the division below. Think how much they lose, and for an entire year they're relegated. I think that's dramatic. But anyway, yeah, different sports. Who cares?
The team that I play on now would have been relegated at some point had relegation been in the NBA. Yeah. For sure.
Can I ask you my first question?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I've already said it, but I'm going to recap on it. When you were really excited to rejoin Sixers. At what point did you find out you weren't going to be a starter? And would you have gone back to Sixers had you known that? Or did you always think that you'd end up starting in some way? And have you ever talked about this on the pod? Because I haven't heard you talk about it.
I've told part of the story.
Okay.
So the part of the story I've told is that I come in for our first practice at training camp, and Brett calls me into his office and says, "Hey, I'm going to bring you off the bench this year. That's the plan. We want to grow Markelle. What do you think?" And at the time, I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Whatever. Just give me a couple of days. I'll be fine." And I went to him a couple of days later, and I just said, "I can't." I think I literally said to him, like, I can't say to other people, don't make it about yourself, and then have me make it about myself. So like, whatever's best for the team, I'm fine with." And I said, I'm on board. I'm still to this day rooting for Markelle's success. For sure. That hasn't changed. The part of the story that I didn't tell was, I signed with the Sixers, and right after I signed, I was out east in the Hamptons and went over to Josh Harris's house, our owner, and we were going over some free agency stuff about some other guys, trying to figure out how to fill out the roster. And he was showing me some slides that I probably shouldn't have seen. They were like internal slides. And there was one slide that was like the analytics guys, their projected starting lineup, and I wasn't on it. And he kind of like gave me this look, and I was like, all right, whatever.
Is this before you signed or after?
This is the day after I signed.
The day after you signed. What was the lineup?
Oh, it was Markelle in the starting lineup, right? So I knew.
But could you have thought maybe that was before you'd re-signed, then made the slide with what they knew they had, rather than the
because
person
the
that ultimately was a free agent?
also included Mike Muscala and Wilson Chandler as part of the rotation, because we had just traded for those guys, and that was like 3 days after I signed. Ooh. So I had known, now this is July, August, part of September. I'd known for almost 3 months that this was either definite or it was a possibility. So I wasn't surprised, like when Brett said to me, "We want to bring you off the bench."
He never told you earlier then?
No, because it's Brett. Yeah, it's fine. I also wasn't in Philly. Like I went down, I was training out east, and then I was in training for most of September in Brooklyn. I'd gone down to watch pickup a couple of times and get some shots up with a couple of our coaches. So it wasn't like he had a chance to, and I appreciate that he delivered it to me in person and not like over a text. And so like,
yeah,
whatever. The other thing too is like, it goes back, this is truthful. I'm not just saying this on a podcast. This is the truth. It goes back to the all-star thing. Like you get to a certain point in your career and you're like, well, it doesn't really matter. Like if we're winning and Markelle's playing good and I'm playing good, then our team's going to be awesome. So it's like, I tried and I try as much as I can to sort of take my own ego out of the equation.
I think you do as well. Like, I rib you on this podcast a little bit, but I actually spoke to you the day after Brett told you, because you called me and let me know. And I think I was more annoyed than you. I was like,
everybody was more annoyed than me. And I was like, whatever.
I was pretending I didn't care, because I was trying to be a nice friend and just going, man, it's fine. You're going to have what an effect you're going to have and and all of this. And meanwhile, I'm like, how fucking dare he? But so that is true. You are that guy who is genuinely about the team. And I think that's a really impressive trait, because I'm not sure I would be able to be that. If you had seen that slide the day before you signed, would you have still signed?
Yes.
Really?
That was the last part of your question. And the answer was yes.
Okay. So you were happy being on the bench this year. You're happy. You were okay to do that. No, because you had other offers, Jay.
It's a great question. And I'll tell you what, I think,
it's all very well saying, sorry, let me just preempt it. It's all very well saying, I'm on this team. What's best for the team is what's best for the team. I respect and I admire my coach. Yeah. And if he wants me coming off the bench, then that's fine. What I'm saying is the day before, you weren't part of that team. So you didn't need to respect the team or respect the coach. And therefore you could have gone elsewhere.
Given the other opportunities that were presented to me in free agency, I still would have picked. This is such a weird hypothetical, but
it's an interesting.
No, but like I still would. This truth. I still would have gone back to Philly. But let me say something. So I think that there's like a disconnect between people that like are not in the NBA and their view of coming off the bench. Like for me, it was like I looked at the projections and I was going to play 28 to 30 minutes a game, like I did the previous year. I knew a lot of my minutes would be with Joe, and I was like, okay, what's changing is I don't get introduced in the starting lineup. I don't get to run out in the fire.
Your face isn't on the poster.
Yeah. Well, it's still not on the poster.
Ah, jeez. Scandalous. Actually, I'm going to give me their number. I'll call them. I'm going to call them.
So you actually said last night that you have a fear that you will be discovered as a fraud. And I said to you, that isn't...
Well, that's out of context. Like,
hold on a second. No, but hold on a second.
Out of context.
It is very out of context.
I mean,
I'm going to explain it away.
It's a quote. Ben tells JJ at dinner he's worried he's going to be found out he is a fraud. I mean, that is not something I once said on any format, let alone your podcast. I refute the allegation.
I should have set the context before saying the quote, but now I'll set the context. We were talking about our own sort of successes and failures, and this idea of imposter syndrome is essentially the fear that you will be discovered as a fraud. And a lot of high-level achievers have this. Jason Stake has talked about this on my podcast. And the point that I brought up to you, and we didn't actually talk much about this last night because we wanted to talk about it today on the podcast, but the point I brought up to you is like, it's a weird paradox that you can simultaneously be incredibly confident in your ability. And I've seen you on set and you're incredibly confident and you know exactly what you want. You know that you're good at what you do. And at the same time, you can somehow self-deprecate to the point that you explain away all of your success, that you excuse some of your success. It's a weird paradox.
Right. I think that, so what's your question?
I don't have to ask a question.
Okay, you're just having a statement. You're putting a statement out there.
Respond.
No, okay. Look, you always feel a little bit out of your depth because you always fantasize is the wrong word, but you always dream of being at the top of your game. You growing up, for you, it would have been playing sport. For me, it would have been producing the Grammys or producing the Tonys or making a late night show or, doing whatever we're doing. And you dream about doing them, and then you get the opportunity to produce them, and you know you can do it, but you're also thinking, how the heck did I get there? And the point I guess I was making to you last night was because you were asking, we've got a few new shows on air at the moment, and so I guess the point I made was sort of making to you is that, yeah, it's when you're hot, and people want to buy your shows and they want you to make them and whatever else, but at some point you're always worried you're going to be found out because at everyone's core, they're always nervous that like they don't actually deserve to be where they are. And I guess what I'm saying is, look, in 4 years, we've got a lot of shows on the air, and but I'm very aware that tomorrow that could all change. I guess that was, I think, what I was saying to you. Given
the level of success that you've had in the 4 years that you and James have been over here, and obviously some of the stuff you've done is separate from James, and I know he's part of Fullwell. But do you feel like you've had to sort of alter goals and expectations? Given I don't want to blow your head up too much because I know you do have an ego, but it's sort of a meteoric rise that you've had in this town in the last 4 years. Have you changed expectations now that you've done all these things? What essentially is driving you at this point?
I think that I'm not convinced it's meteoric success in any way. I think that it's something that people say, and especially people in Hollywood say, and I don't think it's true. I think that we've got a late show that does really well online and does brilliantly, but it's still on at 12:37 at night. and James and I are thoroughly aware of that. I've got a sitcom called Happy Together that, people loved, but I don't know if it's going to get renewed for a second season. Drop the Mic's a rap show, but I worry about that every day because I'm like, I want people to watch it and I don't know if they will. I've got Carpool on Apple, but I don't know if anybody's watching Apple on their phones. Who knows? Of course these shows are doing well. I get that. But I think if you're a sort of person who sits around and goes, oh my God, isn't this great? We're doing really brilliantly and all of that, then you won't be successful because you'll be too pleased with yourself. And I don't think anyone who allows themselves to congratulate themselves or bathe in success that they may be having is ever going to be successful. So when we rate incredibly well, and I don't know when this podcast goes out, but I've got a new show with James and Mike Darnell and Mark Burnett called The World's Best. It starts straight after the Super Bowl. We're going to get bonkers ratings for it. So you can either look at that two ways. You can go, wow, what a show, The World's Best. It rated through the roof. Everybody loves it. Or you can be practical and go, well, it was after the Super Bowl. I mean, people just didn't turn off. And so I think that maybe that's the Englishman inside of me. Maybe it's the cynic. Maybe, I don't know. But my point is, it's like, I think that anybody who ever sits around and says, wasn't I great, is never going to really do well. In the same way that if you finish a game and you've played well, your mind goes straight to the next one. Whereas if you've played badly, you'll never forget it. So I don't sit around thinking about the successes I have, and I'm very lucky that we've had a few. I only think about the ones that aren't doing well, and those are the ones that bother you. I was working with a well-known pop star a while back, was making a film with him, and he says that, and he was scrolling through Twitter, and I was like, why are you doing that? And he's like, because I'm just looking for the bad comments. And I was like, well, why are you doing it then? Because there's no bad comments. I could search your name and it's just an outpouring of love. He's like, yeah, 100 people will just be saying, I love you. This is great. The album's amazing. Can't wait to see you on tour. Can I meet you? Follow me back. But the one that goes, I heard that album, it was shit. Or I don't like him. He's not great. That's the one I remember. And I think that's a real shame, but I think we're all like that. I think that when one of my shows is on, if I'm being honest with you, Drop the Mic was on the other night on TBS. It was our premiere. And I searched it into Twitter to see what people were saying about it. And it was just a plethora of beautiful comments. But the only ones I can tell you about are the ones that criticize the show. They're the only ones I'm going to remember. So I don't know if that's Imposter Syndrome. I hadn't heard of Imposter Syndrome until you mentioned it last night, in truth. All I can say to you is that I'm not somebody who's ever going to rest on their laurels and go, aren't we great? I'm just going to work incredibly hard and hope that these shows that I'm trying to juggle, because there are quite a few at the minute, I just hope that they succeed and just do your best so that there'll be less to remember. Because the harder you work, the less bad ones will happen, and then I can forget the good ones. Does that make sense? I haven't said that very well, but I think you know what I mean.
Total sense.
If I'm only going to remember the bad ones, then I just need to work really hard so I don't have a huge amount to remember.
No, I dwell on the 3 for 12 shooting nights. You have an 8 for 12 night, or a night where you shoot 6 of 10 from 3, and it's like you don't even think about it after the game. You just move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
But
during a game, you can't dwell on it though, can you? It's only after a game, because a great athlete can't miss a shot. They've got to play in the now. They've got to play because they can't be focused on what just happened.
So you bring up an interesting point, because within a game, if I'm having a bad game, I always think that the next 4 shots, the next 5 shots are in. If we're down 12, I always think, oh, we're going to make a run, right? There's famous beach volleyball player, Kerri Walsh-Jennings. She's won a bunch of gold medals. I heard her recently on the Freakonomics podcast, and she said something very interesting. She said, ever since I was a kid, if I'm having a bad game or if I'm losing, I still believe in some sort of fairy tale ending. And I actually, when she said that on the podcast, I thought back to when I was 8 and playing rec league basketball, and we were 0-15, and I was probably the worst player on my team. But even then, I would be in a game and I'd look up at the scoreboard and be, 14-8 with a minute to go. And I'd be like, oh, we're going to win this game and I'm going to be the hero. Maybe that's some sort of complex I have. And it's interesting what she said. She said in 16 in Rio, they didn't win gold. Her and her partner didn't win gold. And she said because she didn't have that fairy tale ending, she has to make another run at it. That's sort of the learning curve, or the drive behind her continuing to play, was that failure. It's fascinating. We're going to take a quick break and hear from the sponsor. With 2/3 of guys experiencing noticeable hair loss by age 35, most guys assume losing their hair is inevitable as they age. Some don't care, some shave their head, some embrace hats. But what they don't know is that there are FDA-approved medications designed to stop hair loss and even regrow hair.
What would you do? Would you wear the cap or go wig or take this pill?
I'd shave my head, but I'd also wear hats. That's why we're excited to partner with our sponsor, Roman. Roman makes it easy to get safe, FDA-approved hair loss treatment, all from your phone or computer. And when you go to getroman.com/Redick, your online visit is free. Consult with a licensed U.S. physician through their secure online platform. No awkward conversations with receptionists or reading bad magazines in the waiting room. Once your doctor ensures that treatment will be safe and effective for you, Roman's dedicated pharmacy can ship your medication to you with free 2-day shipping in discreet packaging. If you're noticing unwanted hair loss, starting treatment early is key, and Roman can help. And today, Roman is giving the JJ Redick podcast listeners a free online visit at getroman.com/Redick. That's getroman.com/REDICK for a free visit to get started. Go to getroman.com/Redick. And now back to my conversation with 6-time Emmy Award winner and 14-time nominee, Ed Winston. I feel like you have a question for me.
My next question. Well, we've sort of gone on to it anyway because we started talking about Twitter. So I am interested by this. You know, I set it up at the beginning and ask it again. But you do this, which I think is the most open forum you could have. You just sit and chat, and you've never asked me what I was going to ask today. I could grill you about anything, as you know I'm going to. But yet you won't be on Twitter or social media. But you used to be on Instagram and Twitter. What changed? Why are you off it? And would you come back? And like, why is it that you're so against it?
Come back for what?
Well, no, I just mean as in like, is it a temporary thing that you've gone offline, or you just disappeared? That's it.
I've disappeared.
Why?
I've disappeared. There's an element of time management involved. You know, the sort of the endless, thoughtless scrolling on Instagram. There's an element of what I perceive to be some toxicity on Twitter. And it used to be, you know, I thought it was just in sort of comments, and I stopped reading those. And then it has sort of spilled into it's spilled into my feed.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, but we were talking about how you get your news, right? We talked about this last night, and it's like, it is a great source of news. And I'm pretty sure that if I was on Twitter, I would have been one of the first to hear about the Anthony Davis trade request that was made today, right? Instead, I found out like 3 hours after everyone else did, but I still found out.
How did you find out?
On ESPN.com.
Right.
Yeah.
So you just go to websites rather than those?
Yeah, I mean, I get basketball from Hoops Hype. I do New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Business Insider. I use Apple News Feed. Some of these are legitimate sources of news, and some are algorithmic based. But I find I get my news. The Twitter thing, I think, too, like, I was reading this article on GQ about digital minimalism. This guy wrote this book. I think it's actually called Digital Minimalism. He had some pretty profound stuff that he said. But, you know, I think overall it's not a healthy habit.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy habit.
I agree with you. I do agree with you. I mean, I use Twitter. Instagram's a bit different, but I use Twitter simply. My feed is so boring. I'm surprised anyone follows me, because all I do is just tweet about the shows that I'm making and promote. But I do get what you mean. I had a really interesting thing recently where I went. It's been quite a hectic year.
Yeah.
In that, you know, I'm juggling a few different bits, and I've got 2. You know, my firstborn's 2, and I'm missing out on a lot of things because I sort of start work so early and I end work at like 10:30 every night or whatever it is. And by the time I'm home, obviously she's long gone. So I only really see her at the weekends, and those are the weekends that I'm not having to work. So we went away for Thanksgiving for like 6 days, and I did something I've never done before, and I literally just turned off my phone and I put it in the safe, and I didn't turn it on for 6 days. And my assistant had my wife's phone number in case there was an issue. And she had to call once. We did have one issue.
Was it with the show?
I was producing the Global Citizen concert in South Africa, and it was a Beyonce issue because she was headlining. So to be fair, she can interrupt. But I was still annoyed by it when I got the call on my wife's phone. But it was amazing how my brain changed from like not worrying and not missing it and not feeling connected. I really enjoyed that switch off for 6 days, and I felt so much better at the end of it. And I did realize for the first time that you do go down a path of like reading articles that you don't need to read, or spending your spare time not productively, or getting involved, like reading arguments between people, or just like watching, like seeing people just shout into an echo chamber about how they feel. It's just to people who listen, follow them because they agree with what they're saying. And so I do understand why you've done that. Do you feel better about it? Do you feel like you're getting less bogged down? I didn't know you were that affected by it in the first place, I guess.
Well, to be fair, I mean, there were a couple incidences where, my Twitter feed sort of had gotten overwhelmed. One being the Chinese New Year video from last February, and then I don't even know what to call it because things get taken out of context. But the story of my car service from this summer.
Yeah, those were two things that hit you out of nowhere, and suddenly your Twitter feed is full of people talking rubbish about those two things.
Yeah, and this had been and there's been so preemptively, or going back, I would say a year to two. It was like, what am I doing on here? Like, there's no real purpose, and like I had kept it. And this is going to sound awful, and I'm just going to say I'm a horrible human being. Like I had kept it because you could occasionally get like cash for like doing some ads. That's basically why I was, having the. Tommy, let me ask you a question. Have my numbers like dramatically dropped from not having Twitter to promote this podcast? It hasn't changed at all.
Yeah, I think my Twitter numbers might drop after doing this podcast. No, I don't. Yeah, it's just that's interesting. You don't feel like you're missing out on a conversation. I don't.
I think the FOMO part of it is real. I mean, there is some level of that was the reason why it was hard to say no. And here's what I would challenge anybody, and this is coming from someone who's sort of deleted all of their social media accounts, and it's been almost 6 months now, and I'm on the other side and can say I don't miss it, I don't need it.
How many accounts? How many accounts did you close?
I had 3 Instagram accounts.
Wow.
I had my public one, my private one for my kids,
and your watches.
My watch account.
I forgot about your watch account. I followed that for 5 minutes and then wanted to shoot myself in the face, so I unfollowed.
It was a weird time in my life.
And then on your Twitter, you had your
just the public one,
and then you had like your 8 burner accounts.
I had no burner accounts.
Okay. Are you sure about that? You didn't have any
I had no burner accounts. But anyways.
I actually thought the burner accounts were quite a clever idea. When I heard the Brian Colangelo story, I actually thought about setting up my own burner accounts to comment on my shows and be like, oh my God, the world's best is amazing. Who produced that? And then like my other burner account reply going, I don't know. I'm not sure about the talent on it, but the producing is sensational. I was thinking about doing the Late Late Show with James Corden is fantastic, but I didn't do it.
Anyways, I would challenge people to maybe try essentially what you did.
Yeah.
And it could be 5 days, it could be 20 days, it could be 30 days.
Yeah.
Not necessarily putting their phone in a safe, but just some level of abstinence and just see how they feel, see how it affects them.
Is it my turn to ask you a question? Is it yours?
I think it's mine.
Okay.
So you have an interesting theory on Brexit, and I want to talk to you about it.
Okay.
We've talked politics a little bit on this podcast before.
Yeah.
This is not going to be a political podcast.
No, it's not. No, it's not a political thing. Yeah. I do have a theory on Brexit. I did tell you about, and I actually heard it from an economist, and I can't remember his name, so I feel very bad not crediting him, but I've given it a lot of thought. I get it's a hell of a left turn that we've done in this podcast, going from burner accounts on Twitter to Brexit. But my theory is this. I think Brexit is going to change Europe and the world in a big way, especially if you're an Englishman and a proud Englishman. I think the fact that England are leaving the European Union is a terrible, terrible thing, and it's a sign of. And I'd get stick for saying this if you had more UK listeners, which I doubt you do, so it might be okay. But I think it's a real sign of the right wing bigotness, in that people are afraid of what they don't know, and people think that because their life isn't great, they need to change it somehow, and they just blame being part of the EU, even though they don't really understand what the EU is or how that will affect so many people around in our country, and it will affect so many products and so many businesses, and it will affect our currency and all these different things. But for me, people say, well, why did it happen? And I think it happened simply because of branding. Because I think so much of politics today is about slogans and selling and personality, and it isn't about policies. People don't really understand policies. I don't think people know whether we really need a wall or we don't need a wall. I just think they either want a wall because of what it symbolizes or they don't. I believe that they preferred Make America Great Again because everybody wants their country to be great than they did I'm with her. Well, I don't know if I am with her. I mean, I'm with her. I'm not convinced that that's necessarily what I want to believe. Do I want to make America great again? Sure. I know it's a very simplistic way of looking at it, but I don't believe people vote in democratic elections for policy. I believe they vote for personality, and that's a real troubling thing. And the two sides in Brexit were called Leave or Remain. And that's what we all had to vote. Do we want to remain in the European Union or do we want to leave the European Union? If I said to you, I'm going to leave my wife, or I'm leaving this restaurant, or I'm leaving this podcast right now, or I'm leaving the European Union, it can evoke emotion. It evokes passion. I'm going to leave this place. That is something that I believe in. I'm following that. If I said, I'm going to remain with my wife, I'm going to remain on this podcast, I'm going to remain in this restaurant, it doesn't evoke any passion. I'm not going to go out and campaign to remain somewhere. If that campaign had been called Unite, I don't think we'd be leaving the European Union. If it was Leave versus Unite, people would have come out of their houses to vote to unite, because unite is something they can believe in. Unite is a feeling, and unite is something that people can vote for and have passion and emotion towards. And if we were uniting with Europe, I think people would have voted for it. But Remain just didn't really evoke anything in anyone. And they lost by, 2%, 3%. And the whole future of our country, because this is irreversible. Donald Trump, whether you love him or you hate him, and I'm not, commenting either way, I'm just saying that will change either in 4 years or 8 years. It changes. Leaving the European Union will never change for Britain. We will always be now an island on our own. It would be impossible for us to rejoin the EU after we leave it. And I think that is simply down to the way they branded a campaign. And if they'd called it Unite, we would never be leaving. And I think that's a terrible, terrible shame, and is what politics has become.
Remind me, did you and James get involved in all?
Yeah, a little bit.
When this was going on a couple years ago?
We did a video. We did a video that we put on our show. We did it on the Late Late Show, and we put it on our YouTube page. And it said, we think, the majority of celebrities, in truth, like James, were coming out for Remain. And we said, we think it's a really terrible thing to leave the European Union, and we think it's done so much good for so many people. And yes, there are problems, but we can sort them if we're together and we're united. But, like videos on the Late Late Show is not going to change, a feeling of so many people that they wanted more. And by the way, I'm not denigrating the Leave campaign, because I think that there is an argument that the European Union hasn't helped Britain as much as they should. And I know there will be people who believe in us leaving the EU that will be very angry by what I'm saying, that I'm belittling their campaign by simply saying if they'd called it something different, it would have been different. But do I think changing the name and making people believe in uniting would have brought out 2 or 3% more, which is all they needed? I think it would have. It's a fair point, right?
It's a very fair point. Branding aside, were you... Let's take away exit polls or pre-polling or anything like that. Were you surprised that your countrymen voted that way? Because this was happening the same time the Trump thing was, right?
Yeah.
And we'll tell our Trump story in a second from the night of the election. But that was part of it for me. Was wow.
I know,
there's
but
really 62 million people that would vote for this guy.
But here's the truth of it: people when it comes to Brexit, there's always a low voter turnout.
Yeah.
Right. There's always a low voter turnout. So you need to evoke emotion in somebody for them to leave their house that day, remember it's election day, and go and do something. To leave the room, you need to go and you need to feel something to go and vote. And so I didn't expect for Leave to win. I didn't expect Brexit. I didn't. But because there was so much arrogance from people who wanted to remain in the EU, I think a lot of people didn't vote because they were like, well, we're obviously going to remain. I don't think people really thought that Leave was ever going to win. But the people who wanted to vote Leave, like I said, it evoked emotion and passion in them. And they did come out and vote. And I think Trump probably is similar. I think Trump evoked so much love from certain parts of America that they believed in him and they had the passion for him, and they didn't necessarily care that some of the facts were a bit grey and he lied a little bit and he said some gratuitous things about women. They didn't really care because he evoked passion in them. And clearly although I loved her, Hillary Clinton didn't evoke that same passion in people. And I think that's sort of potentially why that happened. I think that when this new election happens and you know, elections all over the world now, I think that we're looking at seeing right now policy comes second, and personality and evoking emotion and a feeling in the pit of somebody's stomach is more important. And people vote with their guts. They don't vote with their heads.
It's fair. One of the most surreal nights of my life was election night 2016, which I happened to spend with you.
We did.
And my wife Chelsea, your wife Meredith. We were at Giorgio Baldi in Santa Monica.
Now that you've plugged that, will we get a free meal there as well?
Well, you apparently have a hookup there. I can tell you that right now, because we went there last night, and there's 3 tables. It's a bungalow. It's like a beach bungalow. There's probably 15 tables in the place. It's one room. It is cramped. You and I were touching legs all night at this table, but we had one of the 3 premier tables. And I found out when I got there that the night before, he's like, I'm not sure I made a reservation. So he called and was like, hey, it's Ben. Do I have a table? They're like, no, you don't. And he's like, how's 7:30? 7:30? Who gets a 7:30 table? And he got the prime table. I had multiple people, by the way, this morning on the Sixers. When I told them I went to Baldy last night, they were like, oh, I called. I couldn't get a reservation, including Brett Brown.
I love that. That makes me very happy. It was a who's who last night in there.
It was.
The owner of Red Sox, Tom Werner, and owner of Liverpool.
Yeah.
Had Rita Wilson in there. It was fun. But most excited I met TJ McConnell.
TJ McConnell.
I've always been slightly jealous of TJ McConnell because I felt like I was your mate in LA. And now I see you, you know, hanging out, doing like celebration dances with TJ McConnell. And I'm like jealous. He's like, he's taken your best mate status. And so then I got to see him last night.
There was a team-wide poll that the 76ers did for some promotional material for the playoffs the other day. And one of the questions we had to answer on camera was, who has the biggest bromance on the team? And it was unanimous that it was TJ and I. And TJ and I, actually, I've never voted for anything for myself in my life. And this one I just couldn't pass. Like, I voted for myself. TJ and I do have the bromance.
But yeah, that was a weird night. You were in Baldy's, yes. Yeah. We were there when Trump
election
won.
night, and you and I were just kind of like sitting there, slouched in our chair, looking at our phone, watching the election results come in sort of utter disbelief. It was, I'll never forget that night. I'll never forget it.
How do you feel? Obviously, this is going away from our 3 questions. How do you feel about being back in LA? Like when you come back here, because it's been lovely having you here these last couple of days, and we're seeing you tomorrow going to the game. But like, do you come back here and go, I love this town, I love this city, I wish I was still here, or I miss it, or you're like, oh, I'm so glad I got out of there, or what's your feeling towards it as a place?
I think it's an incredible place, and when I look back at my career, I'll look back at those 4 years of playing and living out here as sort of the 4 best years of my career. I keep in mind we also had Kai out here. We got pregnant with Knox out here, so it's like it was just an interesting part. I became a starter for the first time for the Clippers. So anytime I come back, it's I get filled with a lot of sort of joy and good memories. Today I got back from practice. We practiced over at UCLA. You walk around campus. It's just, it's 68 and sunny, and you get back from practice.
It's a great place.
Jump on a bike, rode down the Strand, down to Venice, and went to Justa for lunch. I mean, just ate outside. It's just.
How do you feel towards the Clippers? Would you shake his hand, or would you run away like Blake did?
I'm not knocking Kyrie, but I'm not gonna be like Kyrie and sort of share my private conversations with people. But I would say that. My feelings and sort of my relationships with anyone from the Clippers has been mended. So it's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
Did you think he saw Steve's hand, or did you think he did what he said, which was he just shoots his last ball and runs into the locker room?
Yeah. So for anyone listening, Blake played in LA for the first time. He's finishing his pregame shooting, and he takes his last shot, and Ballmer sticks out his hand, walks over and sticks out his hand to say, "Hey, Blake, how you doing?" And Blake sprints back in the locker room. So Blake does do that after after every pregame workout.
Back to
yeah. I mean, he does.
Which was his. To be fair to him, was his argument. He said he never saw Steve Ballmer's hand. And
I
therefore,
think it's look. I think
and
it's,
even if he did,
I think it's fine if Blake doesn't want to talk to Doc or Ballmer or anyone for the Clippers or even me. Like, you know, I think that's fine. I that's his prerogative. It's fine. But should Ballmer have gone over that? Like, Ballmer knew his routine. He played for him.
Yeah.
Like, right? Do you have another question?
I do. I wanted to know about locker room. That was what I wanted to ask you about, because there was a story recently that Brett Brown's doing a team meeting and Jimmy Butler disagreed with something quite publicly. Brett came out and said disagreements happen between players all the time. That's fine. I guess what I was wondering is, you know, you were just talking about your bromance with TJ. How important is a united locker room? You've been in so many now. Yeah. People always talked about Chris Paul and Blake Griffin not getting along at Clippers. Don't know if that's true or not. I'm not trying to put you on the spot with that. But you've been in a variety of teams now. I guess I'm interested to know how important that is, and whether it's simply about winning matches and games and that's all that matters, and also how Jimmy affected that. Because, you know, that is something that people said when he joined. People were like, it's amazing he's joining the Sixers, but I wonder how it will affect the harmony of Ben Simmons, Joel, you. And
I think chemistry is important. Here's the thing, though. I think if you're on a good team, you're going to have good players.
Yeah. Big egos.
You're going to have egos and expectations. And this is to my point earlier about the NBA. I think it's inherent that there is drama in the NBA, and on good teams, there's always going to be some sort of level of locker room drama. It's a 15 person sport, but it's 5 guys on the court, 1 ball. Every stat you can think of is out there, and we're evaluated constantly. And you know, you take pride in sort of your performance and your stats, and those numbers determine your salary. Like, it's going to be a little bit of drama. That's just it. Here's what it comes down to me. I don't think guys have to be best friends. I don't think guys have to like each other. There has to be some level of, I'll use my last 2 coaches, 2 words that they talked about all the time. The thing Brett always talks about is having some level of respect for your teammates and your coaches. And the thing Doc always talked about was having some level of cooperation. You know, and those are the 2 things to me. Like, that's all that matters. I don't need guys to like fake high five, you know. But like, if you have like good chemistry on the court, what that could mean is like your 2-man game is good, right? Or like, you're in a pick and roll, and you know, like, all right, this guy's got my back on the weak side, right? That to me is like more chemistry than like going out to dinner to Major Domo on the road.
Second plug right there. How is the locker room at Sixers today?
I think it's good. I said this publicly, you know, first time I got, and I don't think I've recorded a podcast since this whole story about Jimmy in Portland came out. But I've had to.
You don't do them very regularly.
Yeah, exactly.
My problem with it.
I do them once every 2 months. But no, I had to talk obviously to the media since then, and I'll say this on the podcast, and I said this to the media as well. But like, what happened in this team meeting, Jimmy, Brett. First of all, there was no sort of level of aggression. The word aggression was used. I didn't see that. But what happened, I would say, is par for the course.
Yeah,
is normal in the NBA. Yeah, it was nothing out of the ordinary. Brett said the same thing. Nothing out of the ordinary.
So why does it leak?
See, that's the bigger issue.
That fascinates me because I don't know where it leaked from, but something that happens in a locker room should surely stay in a locker room. And the fact that it's leaking, does that not worry you? Does that not mean when you are saying something in a locker room or when you're speaking openly, does it not worry you that surely that's got to be a room of trust where nothing can get out? And the fact that things like that are leaking, that is damaging to both Brett and Jimmy and your team, that's a worry.
It's a good question. I'm not saying every leak is this way, but here was my perception of that situation. My perception of that situation was it was a pretty sort of irrelevant thing that happened, and you go talk to your agent, you go talk to your mom and dad, you go talk to a friend that works for another team, and let's say there were 30 to 40 people in that meeting. Let's say 5 of those people did that, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is a small sort of insular world that we live in the NBA. And so one of them mentions something to someone else, and all of a sudden it gets to Woj, and Woj starts doing his thing where he knows everybody. He starts asking around, and he gets the story. And that I don't. It wasn't something that to me like needed to be leaked. But here's the and Jimmy and I talked about this. But like here's the thing. Like because it was Jimmy, it became a story. Because Jimmy was sort of whatever happened. I don't even know what happened in Chicago. Whatever happened in Chicago, whatever happened in Minnesota. So now he's carrying this reputation, and that's sort of the end result of whatever random thing this happened in the meeting.
Do you think he was upset that it got leaked?
I'm sure he was. It's funny. We've had like a bunch of team meetings since then because you meet almost every day in the NBA, and there's a certain level of like guys just being like, I don't really want to talk. I don't really. And Brett actually, after like 3 meetings, was like, I get it. I see what's happening.
I thought Brett handled it brilliantly.
Brett
I
always
thought his press conference was amazing
Yeah.
about it. I thought it was really.
He's great.
He is impressive.
He's
He's very impressed the way he handles that stuff. He's just totally unfazed. And
if you haven't noticed by now, Brett, he would never throw a player, anyone under the bus.
Yeah.
He's a good-hearted
he's got
man.
your back.
He's 100% has each of his guys back for sure. Ben, this has been a lot of fun.
Oh, we've done it all.
We've done it.
We've covered a lot of topics here.
Yeah, we
from,
have.
From locker rooms to Brexit to Twitter to Blake not shaking Ballmer's hand. I feel like
I didn't even know that the Blake Ballmer story was going to make it.
Who
on
knows
the
what's
pod.
going to come up when we're chatting, Jay? But we've talked from Imposter Syndrome to, I mean, literally, this is. You may not do it every 2 months, but at least I've managed to grill you on a few things on this podcast. Thanks for having me back.
I appreciate you.
I hope I eventually make it to a 4-time podcast appearance.
Well, this is episode, I think this is episode 28 that I've done for The Ringer. So in like 5 years when I do episode 42, I'll have you back.
I appreciate that.
All right, thanks.
Lots of love.
Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of the JJ Redick podcast. I'd like to thank today's guest, Ben Winston, my mate, great friend, and as always, a great guest to have on the pod. If you have any questions or comments, please hit up The Ringer on Twitter. And hopefully we won't go 3 weeks in between podcast episodes, so you will hear from me soon. Thanks.
But JJ won't see the comments because he's not on Twitter anymore.